The email arrived at 7:13 a.m., right as I poured my first cup of dark roast coffee. The subject line was entirely blank, bearing only my daughter's name, Harper. For a brief second, I smiled, assuming she wanted to share a last-minute detail about her bridal gown or thank me again for covering the massive floral deposit. Instead, I opened it to find a handful of cold, clinical sentences. Hello, Fiona. After a lot of discussion with Liam's parents and the wedding planner, we finalized the guest list. The ceremony at the vineyard will be strictly intimate. Liam's mother insisted on keeping the numbers down, but we're going to broadcast it live. You can watch from home. It'll be just like being there. Here is the Google Meet link. Haha, just like being there. My hand remained perfectly steady. I didn't drop my favorite ceramic mug, but I stared at the glowing screen until the coffee resting in my cup went entirely cold. There was no "Dear Mom," no warmth. Just my first name slapped onto the digital page like a barcode on a shipping box. My eyes snagged on the last word. Ha ha ha. A casual shrug typed out on a keyboard, a cowardly way to make something unbelievably cruel sound breezy and light. I set my mug on the granite counter, my mind surprisingly clear. I didn't type out a paragraph demanding an explanation. I didn't call her to beg for my seat at the table. I simply placed my fingers on the keys and typed a single, definitive word. Understood. I hit send. I washed my mug, dried it, and walked to my bedroom to get dressed for the day. I pulled on my gardening clothes, feeling a strange shift in the air. Something fundamental had just snapped, and I knew exactly what I had to do next. It is fascinating what your mind chooses to focus on when a relationship quietly shatters. I didn't think about Harper's childhood birthdays or the time I taught her to ride a bicycle. Instead, I remembered standing in front of a broken water heater 10 years ago, balancing the household checkbook, deciding whether to fix the hot water or send Harper her sorority dues on time. I took cold showers for a month. That is the invisible ledger of motherhood. It isn't just about the unconditional support or the late-night advice. It is the dental appointments you skip so your kid can have braces, the vacations you never book, the quiet mathematics of figuring out how much of yourself you can carve away until there is nothing left. Since my husband passed away, I had two choices: break or bend. I bent. I worked long hours at the library, managed the mortgage alone, and never let Harper feel the weight of my grief. When she changed her college major 3 times, I paid the extra tuition. When she moved back home at 25 after a bad breakup, I repainted her old room and stocked the fridge with her favorite foods. I never kept score, but looking at that email, the math finally caught up to me. I wasn't a guest of honor. I was simply a funding source. I had spent the last 8 months pouring my savings into her dream vineyard wedding writing checks for the caterer, the photographer, and the string quartet. I walked into my home office and booted up my desktop computer. The morning sun slanted through the blinds, warming the hardwood floor. I pulled my thick leather planner from the drawer and flipped to the wedding budget section. I had a very specific schedule of payments, and a massive one was due to leave my account by tomorrow morning. The bank's online portal loaded quickly. I navigated to the scheduled transfers tab, my reading glasses perched on the bridge of my nose. There it was, a pending wire transfer of $12,000, destined for the luxury vineyard estate scheduled to clear at midnight. Right below it, a $4,500 payment for the bespoke floral arrangements. I didn't feel a sudden rush of vindictiveness. I felt entirely practical. If I was merely a spectator in the digital bleachers, I certainly wasn't going to fund the main event. I hovered my mouse over the vineyard payment. The screen prompted me with a small gray box. "Are you sure you want to cancel this scheduled transaction?" I clicked yes. I moved to the florist payment. Cancel. Then I picked up my phone and dialed the caterer. The owner answered on the second ring. I kept my voice perfectly level. Good morning, this is Fiona. I need to pull my credit card off the file for Harper's reception. The remaining balance will need to be covered by the bride or groom. The caterer paused, clearly caught off guard. Oh. Well, the final head count is due Friday, and the balance must be paid in full to secure the menu. I understand completely, I replied. I suggest you reach out to Harper directly for the new payment method. I hung up, feeling a profound sense of lightness. I didn't owe anyone an explanation, and I didn't need to throw a tantrum. I simply packed away my wallet. For the first time in nearly 30 years, I closed the Bank of Mom. I walked out to my backyard, picked up my watering can, and wondered how long it would take for the reality of those canceled checks to hit. The storm made landfall early Thursday morning. I was at the kitchen island meticulously peeling an apple for my oatmeal when my phone buzzed against the marble. Harper. I let it ring out. 2 minutes later, a text popped up. Mom, did something happen with your bank? The venue just emailed me saying the final deposit didn't go through. They're threatening to release the date. I took a bite of my apple, chewing slowly. The phone vibrated again. And again. Mom, pick up. The florist said you canceled the card. What is going on? I wiped my hands on a dish towel and slid the phone into a drawer. I didn't mute it. I just removed it from my line of sight. I had a busy morning ahead. My tomato vines needed pruning, and I wanted to finish a novel I had started over the weekend. By noon, my home landline, a relic I kept purely for emergencies, started ringing. I let the answering machine pick up. Harper's voice echoed through the living room, tight and high-pitched. Mom, this isn't funny. Liam's mom is freaking out. The caterer needs a card by 5 p.m. or we lose the entire menu. Call me back right now. Her tone wasn't apologetic. It was the frantic, demanding voice of someone who expected the world to immediately bend to her convenience. She didn't mention the email. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She only cared about the missing funds. I walked over to the machine and pressed the delete button before her message even finished playing. I poured myself a glass of iced tea and stepped out onto the patio. The air was warm, the sky a brilliant cloudless blue. For the first time in months, I wasn't stressed about guest lists, seating charts, or whether the napkins perfectly matched the bridesmaid dresses. I was finally off the clock. At 4 o'clock, a silver sedan pulled into my driveway. I was repotting a fern on the front porch when Liam stepped out. He looked rumpled. His collar unbuttoned, carrying the distinct energy of a man sent to do a job he desperately wanted to avoid. He walked up the steps, stopping a few feet away. Hi, Fiona. I patted the soil down around the fern. Hello, Liam. Lovely afternoon, isn't it? He shifted his weight awkwardly. Fiona Harper is having a meltdown. The venue is giving us until tomorrow morning, but they need the wire transfer. She thinks there was a bank error. I stripped off my gardening gloves and met his eyes. There was no error, Liam. I canceled the payments. He blinked, running a hand through his hair. But why? Look, I know Harper sent that email. She's just under a lot of pressure. My mother has a very specific vision for the photos, and she wanted a tight guest list. It's nothing personal. Nothing personal, I repeated, leaning against the wooden railing. I paid for the venue, the food and the flowers, but I am relegated to a laptop screen because your mother prefers a smaller crowd. Tell me, Liam, would you attend a party you paid for, but weren't invited to? He opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked down at his expensive loafers. I'll talk to my mom. We can probably find a chair for you in the back. I don't want a chair in the back, I answered evenly. And I don't want to be squeezed in. I simply stepped away. If your mother has a specific vision, she is more than welcome to finance it. Liam looked thoroughly defeated. He didn't argue. He just nodded. Slowly, turned around, and walked back to his car. I went inside and washed the dirt from my hands. By Friday evening, the sheer volume of missed calls had tapered off, replaced by a string of lengthy, frantic text messages. I finally took my phone out of the drawer to clear the notifications. The messages from Harper painted a clear picture of a collapsing house of cards. Mom, please. We don't have $16,000 sitting around. Liam's parents refused to cover it because they already paid for the honeymoon. You can't do this to me 2 weeks before the wedding. And then the message that solidified every decision I had made. Fine. If this is about the guest list, I'll tell Liam's mom you have to be there. I'll make them put a seat for you at the front. Just please wire the venue the money. I need that deposit. I stared at the screen, feeling a profound sense of detachment. She didn't want her mother there. She wanted the bank to reopen. My presence was a bargaining chip, a necessary nuisance to secure the aesthetic she desired. If my absence caused this much chaos, it meant I had been holding up the entire structure of her life without any acknowledgement. I didn't type out a fiery response. I didn't demand an apology. I simply blocked her number for the weekend. I walked into my kitchen, pulled out my mixing bowls, and started measuring flour and sugar. I was going to bake a lemon pound cake purely because I wanted the house to smell like citrus and butter. I felt no guilt, no lingering anxiety. When someone treats your love as an endless, unconditional resource to be mined, cutting off the supply is the only logical step. Let them figure out how to build their own foundation. Saturday afternoon brought a quiet knock at my door. I answered it to find Jenna, Harper's oldest friend, and the designated maid of honor. Jenna had practically lived at our house during high school, and I always liked her grounded, no-nonsense attitude. "Come in, Jenna." I offered, stepping aside. She walked into the living room looking exhausted. "I brought you a coffee," she murmured, handing me a cardboard cup. I just needed to get away from the war zone. We sat on the sofa. Jenna took a deep breath. "I know what happened, Fiona, and I want you to know I think it's disgusting." I took a sip of the coffee. "I appreciate that, Jenna, but you don't need to get involved. You don't know the half of it," she scoffed, shaking her head. "Harper didn't just let Liam's mom cut you from the list. She actively agreed to it. Liam's mom said a widow sitting alone would ruin the symmetry of the front row photos. Harper told them you were having health issues and preferred to watch from home anyway. I absorbed the information quietly. It didn't break my heart. It just confirmed the rot was deeper than I thought. "She's scrambling now," Jenna continued. "The vineyard canceled their contract this morning. The florist released the date. Liam's parents are furious, but they won't open their wallets. Harper is blaming you for ruining her life." "My wallet is closed," I replied simply. "She made her choice." Jenna smiled softly. "Good for you, Fiona." Honestly. She needed a reality check years ago. When Jenna left, the house felt incredibly peaceful. I didn't feel like a victim of a cruel scheme. I felt like a woman who had finally reclaimed the keys to her own life. The wedding day arrived 2 weeks later. The weather was unusually muggy for a Saturday afternoon. I spent the morning at a local pottery studio, working on a clay vase. My hands were covered in mud, my mind entirely focused on keeping the wheel steady. When I got home around 2 o'clock, I made a fresh turkey sandwich and sat at the kitchen counter. Out of pure clinical curiosity, I opened my laptop and clicked the Google Meet link Harper had sent me. The screen flickered to life. There was no rolling vineyard. There were no towering floral archways or string quartets. The camera was propped up on what looked like a patio table in Liam's parents' backyard. A cheap white tent flapped aggressively in the wind. The chairs were a mismatched collection of folding plastic seats. The audio was terrible, mostly just the sound of wind hitting the microphone and a neighbor's dog barking in the distance. Harper walked down the makeshift aisle. She wore the expensive silk gown, but her posture was rigid. Liam looked stressed. His mother sat in the front row, arms crossed, wearing a scowl that could curdle milk. There were perhaps 20 people in attendance. I watched for exactly 4 minutes. I watched them exchange rings over the sound of a passing siren. I didn't feel a sense of triumph, nor did I feel pity. I just felt completely removed, as if I were watching a poorly produced local play. I closed the laptop right as the officiant pronounced them husband and wife. I finished my sandwich, washed my plate, and went to the living room to read my book. 3 days after the backyard ceremony, an email landed in my inbox. The subject line read, "Please read this." It was a long, rambling block of text from Harper. She wrote about how stressful wedding planning was, how Liam's mother had manipulated the situation, and how everything spiraled out of control. "I never meant to exclude you, Mom. I was just overwhelmed and trying to keep the peace with my new in-laws. I'm so sorry you felt unwanted. I hope you can understand the pressure I was under. Let's grab lunch next week and move past this." I read it twice. Not once did she apologize for lying about my health. Not once did she acknowledge treating me like an ATM. She was sorry she got caught without the funds, and she wanted to smooth things over so her safety net would be firmly back in place. Years ago, I would have replied immediately. I would have analyzed her words, found an excuse for her behavior, and paid for the lunch where we supposedly moved past it. But the woman who would have done that no longer existed. I didn't type a response. I didn't send a fiery rebuttal. I simply dragged the email to the archive folder. I didn't block her email address, but I mentally filed her away. If she ever wanted to have a real relationship, she would have to build it from scratch on my terms. Until then, the silence was mine to keep. Autumn settled over the neighborhood quietly. The air turned crisp, and the leaves in my backyard shifted into brilliant shades of amber and gold. My tomato vines had yielded a massive crop, and I spent my Sundays canning salsa and listening to jazz. I started hosting a small book club with 3 women from the library. We drank cheap wine, laughed too loudly, and never asked each other for anything other than good company. I stopped checking my bank accounts with a sense of dread. The money I had saved from the canceled wedding went into a high-yield account earmarked for a trip to Italy I had dreamed about since my 30s. One Tuesday afternoon, my phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. A new voicemail. The caller ID showed Harper's name. I let it sit there while I finished watering my indoor plants. When I finally pressed play, her voice drifted out, sounding remarkably small. "Hey, Mom, it's me. I just wanted to see what you wanted from me. Please just tell me what I need to do." She still didn't understand. She was waiting for instructions, a transaction, a list of demands she could fulfill to make the problem go away. She didn't realize that I didn't want anything from her anymore. I deleted the voicemail without listening to the end. I stepped out onto my back porch, taking a deep breath of the cool air. I looked at the garden I had cultivated, the home I owned, the peace I had finally secured. When you stop trying to buy your place in someone else's life, you finally have the resources to build your own. And my life, exactly as it was, felt entirely complete. Sometimes the hardest part of walking away isn't the distance itself. It's the quiet realization that you were never truly invited to stay in the first place. This story is a powerful reminder that our worth is not measured by what we can provide financially or how much we are willing to bend for others. Love and respect should never be transactional. Setting a boundary isn't an act of revenge or anger. It is an act of self-preservation. When you stop pouring your energy into spaces where you aren't valued, you finally have enough left to build a life where you are. We don't have to set ourselves on fire just to keep someone else warm. If Fiona's story resonated with you today, or if you've ever had to draw a hard line to protect your own peace, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know down in the comments, how would you have handled that email? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. We share real grounded stories about life, tough choices and finding your own way. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.